O-O-T-C. Hey, that's cool.
You got a podcast?
Well, I didn't know that.
That's cool.
Now you do.
Welcome. We are back. Oh, that's cool. OTC's very own podcast and all the amazing people we work with here at Ozarks Technical Community College. I, of course, am Jared Durden, and with me as always...
This is Andrew Crocker, the Andrew Crocker. Sir, how you doing?
I'm great, Andrew. How are you?
I'm doing really great, and I want to celebrate, you and I get to celebrate a little bit one of the alumni of our podcast. Our podcast, we get to interview coworkers who make OTC a better place, but also, this is why we love them so much, they also make our community a better place.
That's right.
A couple weeks back, you and I had the honor of seeing a John Herbert-produced play at Missouri State. How was that experience for you specifically? I was very touched by it. I really enjoyed it. Yourself?
I enjoyed it too, and I agree with you that it was nice having spoken about that specific room, because he told us about another play and his experiences in that room that we saw it. Where were we? We were on the second floor of... It's called the Balcony Theater at Craig Hall at Missouri State. And a very intimate room, sitting in the stage, and it was right there. And at moments, a very kind of intense subject matter and performances, but just amazing play, enthralling. Didn't have a moment of boredom.
It wasn't a very traditional stage setup either.
It wasn't. Normally
there's the bay where we all sit, and there's an elevated platform. We were all, for anybody here who has not been in the Balcony Theater, we are sitting in a semicircle, and they're performing on a flat floor in front of us. And you and I were sitting in the front row, and you have people screaming at each other within the scene, just a foot and a half away. You could reach out and grab their pant leg if you were so inclined. So a really intimate is a great way of describing it.
And I'm interested to think about, or to even try out, what it would be like to see the show just sitting in a different part of the room. Because you had, depending on where you were, you had completely different angles of the performance, and I'm sure that in some way affected the experience.
I bet you that does affect which characters you find yourself sympathizing for and following along. There were entire scenes where we just saw their back and shoulders because they're not speaking to us.
You kind of felt like you were spying on them.
Yeah,
a little bit,
absolutely, and very fly on the wall. And for anybody that has even a little bit enjoyed this podcast, one of our best episodes, maybe our best, was with Herbert himself. Really tracked down his episode because he talks a lot about the type of theater that he likes, and I found that his conversation really kind of prepared me for the play that we were walking into. It was not The Sound of Music.
It was not.
They were not joy. There was very little joy in this play. But it was what was his phrase that he used? Was it naturalistic? What was the phrase that he used for the type of theater that he likes?
Right.
Where it almost seems like you're a fly on the wall of actual human interaction, rather than scripted iambic pentameter. And
it was kind of set to in a college dorm setting, college setting and interaction, so it didn't look unfamiliar.
Yeah,
but it was unique in that those aren't always the conversations that we're privy to, so it was getting a little more intimate into
one of the areas where you get to take what you're applying in the classroom and push it forward into your community. We have Trisha White with us today, and obviously her field is math, but there's no great mathlons, whatever you call that the rest of us can go and observe the way that you can with theater. And I just think that is a great tangible aspect of theater that I wish more fields could replicate. In some fields, it's just flat out impossible.
Now, I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah.
There are some fantastic, almost performance-esque mathematical lectures that you can watch, videos on YouTube that kind of put together really interesting concepts with the coordinated representations and discussions about how they apply. So I don't know.
Oh my goodness. I'm outnumbered by math people today.
And if you remember on that Jonathan Herbert episode, we talked about there's a play called Copenhagen that actually there's blocking within the play that it's structured as if it was an atom, as they're talking about Heisenberg's development of quantum model.
Trish, we haven't introduced you yet. Can you vouch for that? There are these videos that you can watch that Jared's describing that
absolutely
feel very
There's all
performance-y.
kinds of creative stuff out there.
And let's go ahead and introduce our guest today. So we are on the road again. We've come all the way to Richwood Valley campus to talk to Trisha White. How are you today?
I'm doing okay. Doing well.
Okay. I was not ready to be outnumbered by mathematicians today. Although I am enjoying a show right now. Do you have Apple TV, Jared?
I don't, but
I'm watching
everybody keeps telling me to.
I'm watching the show Foundation, which is based on the Isaac Asimov novels, and it's about a group of elite mathematicians who have discovered that civilization is coming to an end, and they're trying to convince the rest of society that their math is right. But the rest of society is us, which is a bunch of math illiterate people. We can't follow their math. And so it's kind of a little interesting allegory in how academia in general, but math specifically, is a tangible, provable science, but is still almost seems like a religion to those of us who just can't follow the advanced concepts that you guys are talking about.
What is the saying? An advanced enough technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Yeah, well, they mentioned this in Thor, the movie Thor. You and I are both big Marvel guys. You Marvel fan yourself, Trish?
Sure, yeah.
In the movie Thor, the characters talk about how Thor can't be a real character. He's just reciting science fiction. And Natalie Portman's character says, which is often a prelude to science fact, is what she often says.
So, Trisha, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into what you do here at the college. Let our listeners in just a little bit on who is Trisha White.
Well,
Who is Trisha White?
I was born and raised in Missouri. I grew up in Warrensburg, and I have always wanted to be a teacher. I kind of fell into the math subject because I was good at it, but I looked around and I saw that a lot of people struggled with it, and that was the challenge I wanted. So that's kind of how I began my journey in education. I've done a little bit of everything. I actually taught a couple years overseas. So I taught in Jerusalem, Israel.
Are you kidding me? How
no.
recently?
2011, 12, 13.
Wow.
Palestinian kids are teenagers, just like American
Yeah.
teenagers.
Sure.
So that was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed that, and came back and started OTC when I got back. So, yeah.
I watched this great documentary on a comedy TV show tracking back when there was a lot of hostility between the United States and Iran. And I guess there's never not. But at a particularly heightened time, a reporter had gone over and ingratiated himself with an Iranian family and just kind of tracked the family around. Sure enough, they have a couple teenage kids who are just smart alecks and a little rebellious and really clever and super compassionate and hearts too big for their bodies sometimes. And you just understand, and we see some of this with Ukraine right now. What separates us from them? It's really, I had the fortune to be born here. That's about all that separates me from my counterparts in Palestine and Ukraine and name it.
Yeah, the kids over there. I think I was blown away by the fact that they were just, students, just teenagers. They love their iPhones, and they also deal with a lot of challenges. A lot of us aren't greeted or have to pass through multiple military checkpoints on our way to school, but they dealt with it every day.
Can I bring up a subject with you that I hope isn't sensitive with anybody, but it's just got to be? Because I've been following, as a politics guy, I've been following Ketanji Brown Jackson sitting in front of the Judiciary Committee, potentially joining the Supreme Court. And I hear some of the questions asked of her, both in the Senate and in the media. And how often I think to myself, her race is a factor. It shouldn't be, but it is a factor with many Americans, and her gender as well. We deal with this in the science fields, in the math fields, very male dominated. And we're blessed at OTC to have both you and Melissa Whitmer, two of our leading lights among the math faculty. How has the experience of being in a male dominated field felt for you? Has it been difficult to navigate it? Have you kind of accommodated yourself effortlessly? How would you describe it?
I think it's better when you're kind of in an education kind of context. I have never been in a research heavy context. My undergrad is in mathematics, but it's also in secondary education. So I have always kind of been in the math education environment. And I think in that environment, I haven't ever felt like I was judged because of my gender. But I have certainly read of individuals who have struggled, in different environments. But I don't have any personal experience of that.
Can I ask you about another area where you happen to be a leading light, and that is something that the three of us are all involved in, and that's the Faculty Senate. Very underrated, very underrated. I've been involved in the Faculty Senate for years now, off and on. Very underrated, and we just had a meeting yesterday, but we have a meeting coming up on a topic everybody listening to this is going to care about, and that is how we manage office hours. And that has been a squirrely little subject. We've not been able to square that circle for years now. That keeps coming up in Faculty Senate. How do we deal with because I think the pandemic really opened our eyes to a lot of more traditional technology-averse people, such as myself, as to how effortlessly Zoom can replace traditional sitting in my brick-and-mortar office.
Absolutely.
So how do we manage that?
Well, as a mathematician, we want to define things. And so I think at the core of that issue is, how do you define an office hour? If you're going to set expectations, that has to be something that is well defined. But students aren't always physically present on campus anymore. So if I'm meeting with a student on Zoom, why can't I call that an office hour or things? So it's a very interesting conversation, because you have to think about all the different parties who are going to have to use this policy, and you want it to be flexible enough to allow faculty to reach the students where they're at, but also be structured enough that you can set established expectations and say, yeah, you need to do this, this, and this. So it is going to be kind of an interesting issue to deal with.
Have you tried to square that circle in your head yet, Jared?
And boy, I have, and I have been in a couple of conversations about this topic on Faculty Senate and just in the break room. And there's more than one side to it, and as with always, there's more than one true fact, right? And so I definitely see how we need to expand our definition, right? And office hours now aren't just in person; they're also online, and we are feeling more and more, I think, as instructors, that we have to be available 24/7. Right, and we need to start working towards a better work-life balance, right?
Yeah.
Versus if you remember Daniel Oganyemi, his first year here, his first presentation, he used the phrase work-life integration, and it just struck a chord with me where I realized, oh yeah, that's actually kind of how I view things now. But there's this other side of the coin that I want to make sure we really think about as a college, and I don't know what this looks like in terms of a policy, right? Like I think more of it as a culture, right? As this kind of agreement we decide to have together. And that's thinking about, if part of the issue that comes up is, well, I have these office hours and students don't come. To me, that doesn't mean the solution is we don't need office hours, nor am I saying that anybody's suggesting that. To me, then, there's also becomes this issue that we need to work on, which is, well, how do we work to develop a better culture among students where they're coming to office hours, where they're spending more time outside of class? That notion of, do you guys remember when you were in college, how many hours per credit hour were you told is reasonable to expect to do homework or work outside of class?
I do remember that conversation, but I couldn't quote it to you.
I think
wasn't it 2 to 1 at least?
At least. So 2 hours outside of class, sometimes 3 if you were in, we were told 3 if we were in the harder sciences, outside of class. And that is not a norm anymore, right? But again, I'm not saying that's how it should be, right? This is where there's such this fine line between, okay, what's policy and what's good culture, right? And how do you navigate the difference between those two? There's
also this challenge at Richwood Valley. We've kind of dove into this idea of virtual classrooms, or virtual, remote instruction, not online instruction, so not asynchronous, but actually synchronous but remote. So I have a calculus class this semester, and I have 11 students. 2 of them are in Republic. I think 6 of them are in Lebanon. And 3 of them are here at Richwood Valley. So how do I serve those students? My 6 students in Lebanon are never going to be able to come to my office at Richwood Valley. They're not going to drive, And so trying to create office hours for them is a challenge. When can they come and talk about things they're struggling with?
And this is a great opportunity for us to remind you, every faculty person listening to this conversation right now is forming an opinion. So this is a great opportunity to just remind you guys, because us faculty senators are elected by you guys. Don't let your interactions with us end there. Please shoot us emails. Back when I was president of the faculty senate, I was stopped in the hallway a couple times. That's always fine.
Join us at the meetings.
And you do have the ability to join us in the meetings, especially now that they're virtual. Trisha and I were talking about, we'd really like to bring those back in person. But even when they are in person, we still have virtual elements. So keep that in mind, folks. Your interaction with us does not stop the second you elect us.
So tell us just a little bit more about your relationship with the college. So have you always been at RVC? What kind of courses do you teach? Give us a little more info on how you work within OTC.
Sure. I was hired as an adjunct for Richwood Valley. The year actually I got back from Israel, and the next year I was just lucky. The next year they offered a new full-time, actually developmental math instructor was my title when I was hired. At Richwood Valley. And so basically what I taught were courses leading up to college algebra at the time. Those courses don't really exist anymore. To have a developmental math instructor just isn't a thing. There aren't enough of those classes that we're offering anymore to have a title, to justify that title. So I moved in just teaching credit, full credit, college credit courses. The developmental are non-credit is why I say that. But anyway, I've taught at Richwood Valley. A couple years ago, Dr. Aberly moved into the dean role. He was in the math department. And so I took his role of lead math instructor. And at the sites, that's a little bit different. I know that title is different at different campuses, but at Richwood Valley, that means that I work with the adjuncts. I observe the adjuncts. I actually make the math schedule. So I decide what we're offering and that kind of thing. And obviously with cooperation with the whole campus and Dr. Aberley and stuff like that. But yeah, I kind of lead the math department down here, our little tiny math department anyway. And I maintain a close relationship with, my colleagues in Springfield and Lebanon and other places as well.
So from your perspective, what does that transition look like moving away from offering developmental courses? Because obviously there still are students with those needs. What does that now look like in the classroom? Do you still kind of see yourself playing 2 roles then in each classroom where you have developmental and the more traditional style?
It really depends on the course. So I teach this semester, I teach a lot of different kinds. So I teach our statistical methods course. I teach our calculus course. I'm teaching a college algebra with support course. So in that course, there are students who really need a lot of help. And you just plan for it. You plan for a lot of practice. You plan for kind of stepping a step back from what you're going to teach that day and say, okay, guys, do you remember? And kind of reviewing that content. In courses like contemporary math, that can be a real challenge because you have students that are ready for the college level content, and then you have students who are very behind. Students who are struggling with adding fractions and things like that, things that are pretty far below what you're trying to teach. So trying to meet the needs of all those students is a very difficult challenge.
Huge underrated challenge for instructors in all fields, but especially writing for some. I get that from a lot of writing instructors and English instructors, but math instructors too, right? You got to find a way to pitch to the middle in a way that doesn't leave the people who feel like they have this subject mastered completely disengaged, but also allow the people who are rudimentary in their understanding at best, give them some sort of ladder to climb up to normalcy. That's a tough thread to needle. And
you have to make it through the content of your course. So you can't get so behind where you're supposed to be in trying to kind of make up the learning deficits of some students. The knowledge deficits, let me say that, of some students, and get way behind. But still, you've got to give all students hope. All students have to feel like it's possible for them. So trying to work hard to do that for as many students as you can is a real challenge.
Especially when, and as you're familiar with when it comes to math, students' outlook towards their own ability to do math were set at such a young age, right? And they'll continue to tell themselves and beat themselves up on whether or not they can do something. And so going into the classroom, and I experience this in science courses as well, they walk in saying, well, I can't do this, which is right off the gate, they're putting up their own barriers that you have to work through.
Well, yeah, I really don't like the phrase "I'm not a math person." Nobody's born. Nobody's genetic structure determines whether they can do math. It's just not a thing. So everyone can. It's just a matter of getting to the place of digging in and getting, the help you need to get it done. I think everybody can. So.
And for listeners that aren't familiar, contemporary math, can you explain a little bit about that? And it's a newer. Well, yeah, explain to us a little bit about contemporary math and its role now.
So when I went to college, everybody took college algebra, and I think that would probably be true of a lot of us that are teaching now. These days, there are different kinds of math courses for different majors. College algebra is for what we would call STEM majors, so our technology, our engineering, our math folk, our science folk. But our non-STEM majors can take contemporary math, and that is a class that has different topics like geometry in it, some probability in it, a little bit of stats in it, some mathematical modeling and things like that. The goal of that course is to really try to present college-level math that doesn't have a ton of prerequisite skill involved. College algebra, there's just a slew of topics that we kind of expect you to know when you show up. Contemporary math has fewer, has a lot less. And so it's more accessible to somebody who's been out of school for 10 years and is like, oh my goodness, you want me to take a math course? What are you talking about? So it's a lot of different kinds of math. I think sometimes we forget that algebra isn't the only, or there's more to math than algebra.
So one of the questions that we like to ask to get to know our guest is, tell us about someone you look up to, you admire, an inspiration of yours that perhaps the listeners don't know about or that you'd like to share.
Well, there are just a lot of people that I have encountered that I love. A lot of my colleagues, Andrew talked about Melissa Whitmer. She just does amazing things with students online. And that is something that I feel like I haven't figured out yet. Like that is something that I personally can learn a lot about and still, have things to learn, I guess.
There's just a handful of instructors. There's got to be more, but just in my limited purview, there's a handful of those instructors that have just their finger on the pulse of what it means to be an instructor at this college. And Whitmer's certainly one of them. We talked about Jennifer Dunkel a little bit, Stephanie Davenport, Jennifer Bump. There's just a number of these folks that it almost makes you say, what am I doing wrong? These people are so freaking good at it.
They're excellent instructors. And, there's been a lot of people I've worked with that have really encouraged me and I just look up to. Dr. McGrady is one. She was the dean at Richwood Valley for years before she was the provost. And so I kind of have this double take. Sometimes I call her Tracy, and sometimes I'm like, wait, maybe I shouldn't say that. Dr. McGrady, you know.
The water down here at Richwood Valley, because we plucked Dr. McGrady from you guys, and she's been great as provost. We've plucked Aberley now. We've plucked Drew. I'm sure there's much more plucking to come, but you guys it's a real interest. Let me ask you this, because we asked this of Craig Granger back when we hosted him. Do you prefer kind of what would you call it, more, the Springfield campus is very hustle bustle, very busy, very swarmed with students, high population. Richwood Valley a little bit more insular. How would you describe it by comparison?
You know, I've never taught at Springfield campus, so I can't compare, but at Richwood Valley, I just, all of the faculty are in one hallway. All our faculty offices are in the same hallway on the third floor, and we talk a lot, we joke a lot. There's a lot of different conversations between people who teach different kinds of things, because it's not, you know, a building with our math and science folk and a hallway with our English folk. We're all in the same hallway. And I really value that and enjoy that. And you know, there's some perks. You can park anytime, any day. Pretty close to the building. We have this gorgeous walking trail that goes around our campus. So there are trees and cows visible.
Not to mention the animals here at the Agriculture.
Yes.
Yeah. We have our little flock on the hill. So I really enjoy it here.
That's a guaranteed mental health break.
Yeah.
Right, anytime you need.
That reminds me too, I missed the last one, but there's also a 5K run that's held here in the fall, correct?
Yeah, the PTA department always does a 5K. They use the walking trail that runs around campus and host that.
Yeah.
So that's always a lot of fun.
Shout out to Dr. Weaver. She won it. At least she won one of her categories. So shout out to Megan Weaver.
Well, you know, she was at Richwood Valley in charge of the Academic Support Center for the longest time. So we'll claim her,
and then we
too.
plucked her, yeah.
I think this really, you know, if we're talking about maybe some of the differences we might find between campuses, something to think about as well is who would win in a battle to the death, Gumby versus Mr. Ed?
You know, I you know, I value intelligence, and I value the fact that he won't speak unless he has something to say. So I think Mr. Ed has a good chance.
He definitely. I think Mr. Ed has the size advantage too. I don't know if that's something we ever flirted with. Has it ever been established? Is there established canon for how big
Gumby is?
Gumby is.
I
Yeah.
don't know, man. Or can he kind of change his size?
Can he manipulate
I don't know.
his mass? That's a
I don't know. But I feel like Mr. Ed would come up with some just really amazing strategy and just knock Gumby out of the park.
Yeah.
And that's a good question too, because I think we have discussed and have evidence that he changes his size, but does he manipulate his mass?
That's right.
Does his size increase mean a decrease in density?
That's correct. Because if he gets himself longer, that might mean he weakens himself some, and he can't quite bring the
a really good
torque.
point.
He can't quite bring the torque that he might if he was horse sized. Yeah.
Fantastic. Okay, so well, besides coming in and wanting to visit the campus and to meet with you, one of the reasons we wanted to meet with you is because you have a lot of experience, or have had quite a bit of experience, and I've noticed on Twitter and in other interactions, you've always been an advocate for MCCA. And so if you would, first, for anyone that's not familiar with it on campus, we'd like you to tell us a little bit about what MCCA is, what those letters mean, and kind of your experience.
So MCCA is the Missouri Community College Association, and it represents the 12 public community colleges in Missouri. It is an advocacy group. It does a lot to kind of keep an eye on legislation that affects community colleges and their people in the state government. So they're kind of there as a both an advocate and just they just keep watch, let us know what's going on and kind of, be sure that people understand how legislation will affect us and that kind of thing. They're also, I've had a lot of experience with them at their annual conference, and I just enjoy meeting people from colleges all over the state of Missouri. I don't know why you wouldn't access that knowledge. I mean, just hearing about what people are doing, hearing about what's working, hearing about things that flopped. I mean, why flop something if
Yeah.
why repeat a mistake that somebody else has already made? And so I really value that kind of relationship with other community colleges.
What is your relationship to the MCCA right now? Are you just a passionate advocate for the MCCA, or do you have some sort of a role, official or unofficial?
I don't have an official role right now. I am a member of MCCA, and I attend their annual conference. I enjoy learning about the different aspects of community colleges. So not just, faculty we teach, but there's so much else that goes on at a community college. So, in student services and financially and all these different places. When I attend an MCCA conference, I love the conversations I have. So in this past November, I was there, and I found myself surrounded by a bunch of folk from the Institutional Research Office, and I got to know them. We talked about what they were thinking about. We talked about all kinds of different things, and just that kind of relationship building, I think, makes community colleges better.
Absolutely. MCCA also, we should mention, puts its thumb, not only does it watch the legislation as it gets developed and informs its members, it also puts its thumb on the scale a little bit. It is an interest group.
Sure, absolutely.
It is an interest group. Mixed results, but it has actually done pretty well in the last year. It's secured more funding for community colleges, a certain chunk of which is going to OTC, badly needed, because again, we should bring Matt Simpson on yet again and complain about how we are one of the lowest funded institutions. But 12 community colleges, it is one of the things I really enjoy talking to them about is how does your college support you, coming from the faculty perspective? How does your college support you? How does it guide your future behavior? How responsive is it to your concerns? And I'm a little biased because I'm coming from our institution, but it stacks up well.
A little more disclosure there, your relationship with MCCA.
Oh, yes. I was elected to the MCCA Faculty Advisory Board, which I believe you've served on before. Is that accurate, Trish?
No, I haven't.
Okay. Faculty Advisory Board is it is a collection, about a handful of faculty who play a role in talking to Brian Milner, who's like our lead lobbyist, about things that are interesting to us and passionate for us. I think most of the MCCA is kind of driven by the university heads, but we have, I wouldn't even say our thumb on the scale, whatever a miniature version of a thumb would be. Mostly maybe a pinky on the scale. For the most part, pinky toe on the scale. For the most part, we are there to help facilitate a bunch of these events that they put on. One of which, probably the most important of which, of course, is the annual convention, which this year was in Branson. Previous year was virtual.
I think it's in St. Louis.
This coming year is in St. Louis, yeah. So Union Station, I believe Union Station in St. Louis.
And when I go to the conference, I learn a lot about different aspects of community colleges. There hasn't been a ton of things for faculty in the past, and so I'm actually, what do you do if you want to change something? Well, you do what you can, and so I try to always come up with some idea or something to present at MCCA for faculty, and hope that my fellow faculty members will join me, and that we can create kind of a little bit of a faculty niche, or more of a faculty niche there. So
MCCA could do more, which is something the Faculty Advisory Board mentions every time we get together. Could do more to be a little faculty friendly. Something Jared's complained about, or I don't know if complaint is the right word, fairly criticized, is that it's held during school days, right? It's held on Thursday and Friday when ostensibly faculty have to be in the classroom, which I think is a fair criticism. I don't know how you can bring the mountain to Muhammad on that, but it's a fair criticism. Also, a lot of the presentations tend to be administrative. They tend to be staff. They don't tend to be faculty as much. But that's something that we do have the power to change.
And I would say that the more you know about what's going on at your school, the more the better recommendations you can make. So if I have something I want to do, if I have something that's important to me or to my students, if I better understand the problems and the issues, the finance people, the scheduling people, whatever, all aspects of the college, what they are facing, then I can make a better proposal. I can be a better community member at OTC because I know what I want to change, but I can also think about what their concerns are when I'm proposing changes. So.
Yeah, I'm sorry for dominating the conversation. That's my fault. But I will say that understanding how other factions of OTC work, because we are very, what's the word? We tend to be little factions, little fiefdoms that don't overlap as much as we should. But the better you understand them, the better you can serve your students.
Absolutely.
Because making sure that they are better served outside of the classroom improves their performance inside the classroom. So I just think that's something we underrate.
Something that came to my attention at a meeting recently that I wasn't aware of. We were talking about so in Norman K. Meyer, we have a couple lunchrooms in our break rooms where people get together and they eat lunch. That apparently is not a very normal thing. At RVC campus, do you guys have a break room, lunch table, people meet at and eat?
Mm-hmm. On the third floor we do.
What about you guys over in ICE?
Not really. We do have a break room, but it is largely used for office supplies, and it had printing and scantroning. That's about it. So there are areas there.
And so it was some staff that were like, well, we don't have a table.
Yeah.
And if that, with what we're talking about, there's a quick solution. If we had kind of a lunchroom-esque break room where faculty and staff could start hanging out and having a place and having space to meet up. Maybe we break down those. I like the fiefdoms.
Fiefdoms, yeah. And actually, we can take a page from Vicki McDonald on this, who recently got a Game Changer grant to build a community-like setting for students. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know exactly. Are you gonna bulldoze my office and turn it into it? I don't know, but there is area for growth there. And by the way, feeds into the mission statement of this particular podcast, which is break down the barriers between us. And
maybe we do a Game Changer grant, huh?
There we go. Trish, you're hearing it right now. We're going to rope in Trish. You're talking to the right person. You want to get one approved, you talk to Mr. Durden here, but I wouldn't bet against Trish White either. So
you had mentioned that you've presented a few times. What are some of the ideas that you've presented at MCCA?
So I have, the very first time I presented on reflective instruction. So that's just the idea of being very thoughtful. And one of the things I talk about is you don't want to be surprised by the way your students do on a test. You want to know right where they're at. So what are some strategies to constantly sample that, constantly keep in mind, what do my students know, what do they not know, that kind of thing. So it's just a teaching kind of idea. This past time I presented on engaging students on Zoom. So how do you keep, the black boxes engaged? How do you keep students from just logging in and disappearing? I call them Zoom ghosts.
Yeah.
And so how do you keep them from ghosting you, And they're just strategies. They're not foolproof. But, if you layer them, you can do better.
At the top of that list would be what? How do you engage the Zoom student? At the top of that list, Trish.
Talk to them and make sure they talk back. I am not a fan of forcing students to turn on their cameras. And I learned that during COVID. I actually had a conversation with a student, and she turned on her camera, and it was a one-on-one conversation, so it wasn't in front of a classroom. But it broke my heart. She was in something that she called her bedroom that looked to me like a completely unfinished space, maybe like a shed. I don't know. And there were bugs everywhere. And you just had to stop. And I also have my little rule that you never comment on the surroundings of a student. I don't want to point out or invade their space. So
sure.
I'm not going to comment on that. And I just remember looking at that and thinking, this is why she never turns on her camera, you know? And I'm not going to force her to do that. So, but what you can do is say, you know, James, how you doing this morning? And expect and wait for an answer.
Yeah.
And they start to learn that, oh, I need to be there when she calls on me. And if a student misses it, if I call on a student and, you know, silence, I don't come down on them. I just follow up with them after class and say, hey, you know, did you have any technology issues? I noticed you were missing during class. What happened? And, you know, sometimes they'll tell me. I've had students tell me that they got off a night shift and they just fell asleep. Okay. All right. So what are we going to do, you know, to fix that in the future? And so I've actually had conversations with students where I'm like, Zoom may not be the best option for you. You live close to campus. Why don't you come to campus? Because this isn't working out, you know.
Can you talk a little bit more about, what's that phrase? Reflective
instruction.
Can
it was titled.
you flesh that out a little bit more for me? Because that sounds interesting.
Yeah. So it's just the idea that you want to present something in class and then think about how it went. Maybe even jot that down in kind of a teaching log. I find that I have a lot of good ideas about the lesson I just taught, but by the next semester, I forget them. So when I can do it, and there have been semesters that this works out and semesters it just fell by the wayside and couldn't happen. But when I'm on it, I like to sit down after class and just say, okay, this is what I taught on. These are the changes I want to make, and just really quickly write them down in what I call a teaching log, and just think about it. Also, having the students think about their learning is part of that. So I do some activities with my online students where I have them work something, and then I give them the key. So this is a very low stakes kind of assignment, because I'm not really concerned that they get everything right. You know, I'm not going to even check if they get everything right. They do the assignment, they check the assignment, and then what is the graded portion, I guess? You really just have to invest time and effort into it, is to think about, okay, what do you know and what do you not know? What did you not understand? What did you learn from this? In math, you know, it's important to display your answer appropriately and back it up. You know, you can't just say the answer's 4. How did that happen? You know, so just asking them to think about that. Okay, if the test was tomorrow, what do you need to do to make sure you get the grade you want to get? That kind of thing. So
Go ahead, sir.
We call it metacognition, and it's crucial because it's this idea that we do things because we find value in them, right? And understanding requires ownership, and so, you know, that's such a good example of showing your work, because initially you'll hear students tell you, I'm doing this because you told me to, or I'm doing this because I have to, versus, you know, getting to an expertise or getting to a level of ownership where you go, I did this because now I can check and I'm confident in my answer and I don't have to ask you, see, this is what I did, or because I wrote everything out, now I can look and see where I went wrong. And when you have that value as a math student, it changes your whole world, right? You're able to really grasp a hold of concepts. And
you know, sometimes students have no idea how lost they are.
Yeah.
They sit in class, they understand what you're saying, they follow what you're doing, and then you give them something like that and they fall apart. And it is incredibly valuable for that student to sit down and say, I don't know near what I thought I did. I mean, I understood it when you said it, but now I realize I cannot do this on my own yet. I fill that in for students quite a bit. They'll tell me, I don't understand anything, and I'll say, yet.
Yeah, yeah, sure. I really want to underline that, again, this is sprouting off a conversation about the MCCA. The MCCA is first and foremost a lobbying arm of community colleges in Missouri. But you get to take advantage of it as an instructor or as a staff member, because we have these great breakout sessions that you are describing, that you yourself have driven, Do you know if you're doing anything in St. Louis? I mean,
we're
going to rope in Jared. Jared's going to come up. We're going to do an MC. We're going to do
Let's do one on podcasts at community colleges.
that. Now you're listening to it, folks. This is how ideas get started. We'll just straight up do an episode while we present to it. Boom. Yeah, boom. We'll rope in Trish. Trish will be our star guest, and we're rolling.
Well, I am all for proactive approaches to anything. So if you go to MCCA and you think there's nothing for me, well, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah.
And one of the things you can do about it is create something you would like to attend and present it at MCCA. So
that's fantastic advice, and that's what we try to instill in our students, right? Like, I'm always for being consistent in that model, right? The things that I want from my students are the lessons that I've learned, right?
Well, I would also say that any chance you have to build relationships with people in your own institution or in other institutions is just invaluable. I'm a part of a lot of organizations. MOMATIC is like the Missouri Math Teachers Association. I love that organization because if we have a problem, a couple years ago, we had a student having trouble at State Fair transferring one of our courses there. I didn't call State Fair. I called Kim, who I know at State Fair, to ask her about what we could do to fix this problem. I know Sarah at East Central. I know Mike at St. Louis Community College. So by knowing these people, it makes me a better advocate for my students. And I learn from them. Everything they do well, I'm going to bring back and try to integrate into my classroom if it fits my style, things they learn that bomb, I want to learn from their mistakes too. So I think the more that we can do that, and faculty can do that, student services staff can do that, administration can do that. The more you can learn from your colleagues, the better we can do what we do.
And you call that MOMATIC?
Yeah.
I love that name.
It's the Missouri Mathematical Association of Two-Year College.
I've had a couple PLS instructors from other community colleges across the state, and we often complain about being islands and how it would be great if we could have a little bit more of a statewide collaborative thing. And I'm like, just like the math people I know.
Just do it.
I didn't know your level of degree of involvement. I'm right down the way from Melissa Whitmer, so I know her degree of involvement in her. And by the way, we might as well just give her 2 seconds of a shout out. Congratulations. She won, what was her exact thing? Math instructor.
The Teaching Excellence Award for MOMATIC.
Congratulations to her. Yay. We love Melissa Whitmer here. But on top of that, they were just like, that's what we want. We want to take that from the math field and apply it to PLS. And there's really nothing other than enthusiasm stopping you from doing that. Or for a statewide physics is there a statewide physics instructor organization that we should know
Absolutely.
about?
American Association of Physics Teachers, and then there's also a subgroup called Physics Education Research Group.
Okay.
That's the kind of the education research arm of that has its own separate conference called PERC.
Understood. You guys have a conference, right?
Yeah, actually it's in 2.5 weeks.
Okay. Where
I
at?
saw AIM move to Caltech, I just saw in the news.
What now?
The American Institute of Mathematics
Is now based in Caltech, is what you're saying?
Sorry, I jumped in there.
Sorry,
I just read that.
Yeah.
MOMATIC's actually at East Central. And
Okay.
I hope I'm not jumping the gun, but I'm campaigning. It's not certain, but I'm trying hard to make it at UTC next
There you
year.
go. Sure.
Oh, very cool.
Sure. I wouldn't bet against you. Bet against you.
So I'm working hard at that.
Yeah.
So correct me if I'm wrong. Any instructor at OTC can get a membership to MCCA. It's either free or covered by OTC.
I believe they're automatically. They made a policy change a couple years back, just like 2 or 3 years back, where now automatically we are all enrolled. And so we have the added benefit of you could opt out, but you're already pretty much in it right now.
So right now, what website would a listener go to make sure they're informed on MCCA? Do we just Google MCCA?
You could. Yeah, absolutely. It's I don't remember the exact website. It might be like MCCA Now or something.
That sounds right.
I don't know.
But we also get the benefit of the MCCA sending us emails on the regular. So you don't have to be as proactive as you need. We do come to your doorstep and say, We're having a convention. We're accepting proposals. And again, one of the things we really, really want you to stress, if you are listening to this in administrative or staff or the faculty wing, or, even if you're an adjunct listening, really, if there is something you're doing that more of us should know about, that's what these proposals should be all about. A couple years back, me and the great Jackie Harris, the great Kara Griffin, the three of us did a presentation on the Springfield votes that we do every year, and that we just did a couple days back. And I've seen presentation. Jackie Harris does a presentation, I believe, almost every year about this or that. Last year, I got to sit in on Dr. Barrett, Vicky McDonald, Evan Durr, I want to say, a couple of these people who are promoting the Eagle Breakfast. So this is something that community colleges should pay attention to, but most your colleagues should pay attention to, because I'm always trying to steal ideas from colleagues.
Yeah. So that website is mccatoday.org.
Not now, today.
Sorry.
Yeah,
Close.
sorry. You had the immediacy down, though.
And if you have an idea, if you're interested, if you just need a little motivation or a little encouragement, I think Center for Academic Innovation, stop by, talk to Jackie anytime. I bet she would give you
every time.
You can do it every time. Myself, Andrew. Can we throw you in that boat,
Absolutely.
Trisha?
Yeah.
I really like this idea of encouraging each other to get out, to associate with peers and colleagues.
It's fun, It just is fun if you will just do it, Once you get there, it's just a really good time.
And this is actually going to be a future episode at some point later this year, is that the last MCCA, which I attended in Branson, gave me a great opportunity to spend some time with some people on the staff side. And before you know it, we're all talking at the O'Shaughnessy. What's the name of the place on the landing? It's called like O'Shea's. It's got the Irish pub. What's the name of that place? I forget. But anyways, we're all sitting around, and after a while, we all start talking about running races. We have Danielle Wise with us. She's a big-time marathon runner, and so we're like, let's just do a Tough Mudder together. We rope in Jared. Blaine Radford is organizing. Before you're long, now we got like a team of like 8 or 9 people, and we're all running a Tough Mudder together in late April. We're going to bring in a bunch of these guys. We're just going to have a big old podcast potluck and talk about who got shocked the worst, who got froze the worst, who got stuck in the mud and had to be rescued.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
You're about to see a whole nother side of me.
I'm 75% excited, 25% concerned.
So, just fantastic talking to you today. Learned so much about MCCA, kind of about your experience, about RVC, about teaching math today and for OTC. Man, Andrew, I didn't know that.
I did not know that.
Oh, now you do.
Thank you.